violence.
Hey, look at these red dots that appear when I shoot people in video games. Actually not in GoldenEye, but that's still a perfect example for this type of violence. Realistic violence doesn't need to have blood. It don't even have to be particularly violent. It's the most boring type and widely used and prevalent in all kinds of media, just because it's what happens when someone gets injured. When applying the realism type, it matters more which types aren't used. The next segment talks about this. Let's make a gauge. It's still realistic no matter how violent it gets if none of the other types apply. Censored or implied violence always counts as realistic, even if the story says it's a different type. For violence to not be realistic, it shall always be displayed wholly within its medium's capabilities. The famous controversial torture mission in GTA 5, the first time many gamers were confronted with guilt-free player action or just actual real-life FBI CIA cruelty. I argue it's clearly a shock marketing technique, even when Mr. K is an innocent civilian, because it doesn't seem made to be brutal or overly immoral like other fiction. Let me explain why. The lightning obfuscates the front body where most of the action happens and there's little blood. Manhunt exists, we know Rockstar can do better. Combined with Rockstar's satirical approach in making the world of GTA 5 and even bits of its story, it sticks out that it isn't sophisticated violence. GTA 5 doesn't deliver violent fantasies as much as sandbox shooters, and the world isn't even dark like Gotham City. Even though it has a tendency to be violent, even with the rampage missions, this is what makes it a great example for realistic violence. Regardless of which country you live in, you'll probably know its age rating system and along with that ESRB or NPR. This is because most media is released in America. Japan's self-defense forces Article 9. The Yankees and Yankee-Zubari originate from this occupation, much like the Halbstarken in 50s-60s Germany, which are just the many fatherless kids after World War II's Nazi recruitment. Their only male role models were American movie stars. The states that America occupied in Germany are now the states with the highest GDP per capita, to a horrifyingly accurate degree. This just shows how much of a power America has, and that even after 50 years, impacts of the occupation are still easily noticeable. The Halbstarken don't exist anymore. There are no delinquents doing the Yankee-Zubari today. Just recently, Japan has gotten back control over its military. This is how long it took. This is the scale of war. Due to the economy after World War I and World War II, every competitor got swallowed up. As the only nation that won World War I and II, America still has the most influence in the world. Einstein's famous quote of World War IV, Sticks and Stones, references this. Compared to Britain and France, who are major, even colonial powers before World War I, Germany and Japan are lucky outliers. America's culture or trend export monopoly is real. You can find science anywhere. Americans being seemingly the majority on most popular social media, even though China and India have the largest populations and also the most internet users, hence you saw American movies trying to reach China. Meanwhile, Chinese and Hindi both aren't the world language. It's deep-rooted English, held by hand by Britain and America. But the war is long over, and with TV shows and movies, America's monopoly should be decreasing. Korean Parasite won the Oscars 2020, Netflix and streaming services buy and even finance media from different countries. The internet at large is dominated by US big tech. Netflix is part of that. Yes, the internet itself was invented in America, also for the military. Odd and dark way to finish off this mini segment. Sorry for the schizorantic. America's cover website looks unfinished and defunct. Filmratings.com, corny education field. Links to motionpictures.org, which is the actual site and pays tribute to America's film culture in its own weird capitalistic way. Job positions, real, but it feels more politically focused. North Korea has no age rating system. China only has 2 ratings, either banned or available for all. The PUBG Green block controversies make sense, but Chinese censorship really seems more like than advertised. So maybe the PUBG block was just some power move against Tencent. Somehow the new in-game shop restriction laws remind me of the Chinese opium crisis, but the stock for each video game company in China is sinking like crazy. Netherlands Kiezer system. I see care because they got a very nice website. A modern reaction to dangerous TikTok challenges is the dangerous dance tag. They even have a nice little ad. Kiezer is really different from the other ratings. Other countries also adopted or took inspiration from the Kiezer system. Belgium, Turkey, Italy, Iceland, Finland, South Korea. Meanwhile, the German FSK website looks like it's stuck in 2004. At least it's maintained. Usually late night television is more geared to adults, since kids sleep earlier. There's fierce competition around the airing times. In Japan, seasonal anime adaptations from manga, which are just Chinese cartoons compared to Japanese drama. But have you noticed how a franchise is always easier to invest into because there's already an audience, like with this wave of MCU and Star Wars content? Of course, compromises can also result in creativity, like in the Batman animated series. This all sponsors and advisors say, look at Gravity Falls censorship letters and you'll notice how old-fashioned many gears in the system to RTV are. Power is probably the easiest to identify. Often a visual showcase of someone killing or inducing injury just alone. Mass is clearly involved, be it muscles or blood.
Okay.
A character can be powerful in reputation and actual action scenes, so let's determine a connected and disconnected percentage. What power do we first see from John Wick? Reputation. The mafia guy talks about pencils. Once John Wick kills a bunch of henchmen, it's around 50-50 and then rises through the movie. Gotta be fair. Power isn't always defined by violence, is why this type is very technical. Other types really like overlapping with power. So since power isn't bound by violence, this Hans Lada scene clearly isn't about violent nameless soldiers or guns, but it's of Lada's connected power. Power is only disconnected when the character is absent from the scene. Hans being the commando might as well count as magic. Masters and crowds are casualties. Godzilla represents nukes, but he's a character instead of just a simple allegory. Satoshi's Gun's Godzilla is a big black god lizard. He fits Power's requirements and moral breaks even. With the opera song Igniting Sympathy, he's a great example even. The rules are that the kills have to be sought in close proximity and have at least an objective reason in the character's eyes so it's not morally too unnecessary. Now, finance half the population. But Sukuna destroying Shibuya here aren't collateral casualties from the Mahogara fight, but I believe he also does it to spite Yuji. And this is another perk of the power type. Collateral as in fictional doesn't exist. Old Hollywood movies guns always have insane knockback. Destruction in video games are for gameplay reasons. It's all about exaggerating and adding to power. Omni-Man vs. Mark doesn't count as collateral. Omni-Man wants Mark to see their power. Most of the casualties are connected violence. However, that border is frail, and if the casualties are committed by the hero or good side, you should expect them to be disconnected. Like in this case, Mark surviving these attacks shows his defense power, but it's disconnected power. Because Omni-Man punches him, I argue that Mark being resilient doesn't count as connected power. It has to be initiated or linked, and vice versa. A pretty common trope in shonen anime is the blood tax. Baki is a goofy but genius martial arts anime, with manly themes. Before Baki really starts fighting prehistoric pickle, he falls 30 meters. Twice. Baki has a big variety of types in it too. Jujutsu Kaisen always makes this trope shine. When Yuji loses blood, Sukuna awakens. Anyways, look at TV tropes for more about this kind of stuff.
If you feel safe in the area that you're working in, you're not working in the right area. Always go a little further into the water than you feel you're capable of being in. Go a little bit out of your depth. And when you don't feel that your feet are quite touching the bottom, you're just about in the right place to do something exciting.
Is that what you want?
This video was too hard for me too. Perfect. But perfect is the enemy of good. As long as you don't give up, you don't fail. There's diminishing returns at a certain level of production value.
You just don't turn it off!
I'm promoting media literacy and making a YouTube video with this comment. Summarizing Posted, mention its morality features. Posted 2 comes after dark, controversial, pollution build, insanity max, mass shooting game. Posted. It's only as violent as you are. The only point for this video, sandbox games can sometimes lead to funny or gruesome scenarios. Take these: Roller Coaster Tycoon, Violent Sims, Killing Sims, and there are 2 green text. Hey, what about Tom and Jerry and Family Guy's soulless violence? Violence doesn't need blood or visible physical injury. This car advertisement is a great example. I couldn't leave these 2 cartoons out of a video about violence, infamous and tragic. Happy Tree fans, the infamous grade school there, yes, it's still in 2024. More major than just shock value and good iconic characters, sometimes even muffled swearing, has disabled characters dying, which might cause discussion in a later type, but you will never really find the satisfaction of the grim humor in other shows. You can tell it was a huge success. On Mando's website, almost all top 50 clips. The newer episodes display anatomy properly, still within the cartoony art style. Unlike Family Guy, the new episodes are better, with more lessons and detail. Unique cartoons like Happy Tree Friends compared to Family Guy are like the opposites of what happens if you succeed. A show so corporatized and a copycat of Simpsons that it has 22 seasons, both started in 1999, and it's DDD slop now, even itself making jokes about being a copycat 13 seasons in. Happy Tree Friends has value and is still famous today. Family Guy is just the amount of fun there to keep you from changing channels, but not to make you too engaged and pay attention. It's literally like the TikTok brain rot gamble. There's so many trashy Netflix Rick and Morty clones too.
Bro, I can't believe Nickelodeon aired this out, bro. Oh my, yeah. Nah, I can't watch this, bro.
Its stiff Nekojiro depicts a real place and time. With a deadbeat dad and poverty, the big discrimination shows it takes itself seriously enough to comment on society, either with a quick lesson or just nihilism. That said, it gets really funny with the dark humor. Where Happy Tree Friends just outrageous violence, Nekojiro approaches its themes in a more nuanced, figurative way, but of course also often with actual death at the end. It's so violent places casualty, Nyako and Nyata are savage cats. It even predicted the Dr. Phil episode with the dog person and talks on how to treat kids and upbringing. Mascots are huge in Japan and the characters were great for that. Manga artists get treated like livestock, and 1998 Nekojiro killed herself. She suffered from bipolar, and like many mangakas, she was overwhelmed by her work's popularity and the harsh margins. In 2001 her husband made Cat Soup as an homage, a psychedelic movie about recovering a dead Nyata's soul. All the episodes are on YouTube, for both shows actually, both came out in 1999. I'm a zoomer, but I can tell that it was better back than if you judge by growth. I have a feeling indie studio Einstein didn't improve very much since like 2012 to 2016. Happy Tree Friends appeared during the beginning of Flash, the internet was more idyllic for passionate creators, technology is well set in concrete, New God is older than YouTube. Nowadays something like Mandela Costa Look is, even if innovative, still on the same platform as everything else, still made with the same technology as everything else, ease of use for customers, or is this a myth? The many casual violence stories from Pinocchio, Fritz and Moritz, I'd even get a chance to talk about how the internet globalized the world, and how all these stories were, albeit similar, mostly native to the country or even regions of it. Pinocchio is a violent boy. At one point he kills a talking cricket because he doesn't want to get a job. It's a kids comic, I mean the original Pinocchio. Violence in kids stories and their folk tales were normal back then. Lessons were mostly advocating for dangerous, less artistic sense. Is Brother Grimm's actually partially porn? Huh? Story Peter's great design, who wins? Heel vs 6ix9ine is just a nice cover art to a kid casually dying to negligence or bad manners. Since they are targeted to kids and since Max and Moritz were kids and play pranks, I've chosen to put these stories into the comedy type. Stories like these which were made in a darker World War age might have fit the grimdark type. This was actually read to me in a conservative kindergarten, by the way I visited 2 kindergarten entries, so I'm still fail all. It's only interpretable, these shorts are of a charm, and they pinpoint a feeling or concept. Max and Moritz has the 6th prank which is all about silhouettes. At the end of these 2 pranks this rampage both end up grounded in Miller's windmill. Japan should be more in touch with its folklore because Christianity isn't a spread. Instead they believe in yoga and curses or some, like Jujutsu Kaisen. Kashima Reiko is the scissors ghost. Her summoning ritual is similar to Bloody Mary. There's also the German Dammschnitzer, cutting the Famio Sakulan. Mirrors, scissors, a haunted past. Pinocchio got politics and generational undertones, many yokai have a lesson or real-life analogy. There's a local food truck called Bolte, the name of Max and Morit's first victim. These folktales still have a huge significance today. Disney, the Hitman, and the modern urban legends are rising. Pinocchio has tons of adaptations, and I'm putting folklore in this video. They are nuanced and show it would be entitled to think that the past doesn't have its own society or ideas like we experience today. This really ties into today too. The 2000s video game myths like Ben Drowned or Sonic X, creepypastas Jeff the Killer and I Like Jack, a brief period of social media and internet arcs like Cicada 3301, and now 2020, this wave on analog horror, so much it even crosses into video games because of the influences ARGs like Local 58 had. Still, some of these turn into brain rot, we just get fed into iPad kids, Jolga, Skibidi Toilet, even Undertale is still relevant. I wonder where the border between folklore and just video game really lies nowadays, since media changed a lot from word of mouth to public screens. This is the part darkness to the beautiful lesson to not underestimate our ancestors. It's even brain rot content farms who are growing. Modern day comedy and shock. Whitest kids you know, even though it's more of a comedy type and you know there's a sniper before anyone dies. Resting category. A scrapped grim violence archetype. A short clarification stop. General gist of shock violence. Really hard to distinguish from bad comedy. And shock for the sake of shock, encouraged by postmodern television. In simple terms, the reason some shows don't take themselves seriously. Sudden snipes. Done well, the monster anime paranoia killing. Mediocre but effective, the boy's human explosion. Hard to find and pin down but oddly frequent. This actually can happen when you watch gore videos or horror movies. Your brain laughs so it doesn't have to confront the reality, even when you know it's literally not real, like in a horror movie. Cue Elvis the alien laughing. LOL. Apparently there's 3 responses to gore videos: laughing, emotionally shutting down, or feeling adrenaline dopamine. Just like the script type grim violence, where it would have been violence with an edgy or dark undertone, like everyone is criminal. Gotham City as a setting would have been a god example. GTA 4 also would have appeared. This is Monster, a great scene, sends chills down my spine and shocked me a lot. I did edit it, so watch the real thing. Shock can be anywhere, so this is just a rest point in the video, because the next 3 get intense. I promise. Get a taste of the upcoming type combined with Power Remnant. The secret reason why Death Note is genius. In the trolley dilemma, the ones who don't pull the lever often don't do it because they then have to kill someone and actively involve themselves. This is why Death Note is an extreme critique of Japanese society and its future. In Gantz you can also see this with nobody helping Kuro save a hobo, and it's a very Asian message by the way. Socialization in Asia is insane. The Death Note kills someone if you write his name inside, but it's possibly the most disconnected, remember, narrative killing tool you can imagine. Kira even gets his first kill over a television line, but of course Kira actively involves himself in killing the scum of society. I made this observation but I can't fit it in my model. Is it power because one kills a lot? Is it disconnect because it's only the Death Note? No. This is a perfect sign of power. And I pity Kira, but not everyone could just kill. Therefore, Light in the world of Death Note has a power. His psychopathy. No, I can't say it in a different way. Kuroko Game Cruelty Squad has some nice commentary on society which got imbued into the game through right brain hemisphere maxing. I'm sure of it. In Cruelty Squad you can cause mass shootings. One even happens in the beginning cutscene. Good innocent mall mayor assassination target. There's a cannibal modification, a group gun turning civs into living goop, and a stock market. In Heat, a great movie too, the gangsters kill shell shock police. The shock type also applies here. Moral violence is by design discriminating. It changes with the times, but right now I'd say that if non-combatants, old people, women disabled or children get injured, then it's moral violence. Inglourious Bastard is slightly in the moral grey zone, and oddly enough every fight in the movie is dead. But it remains working as a revenge fantasy movie, since Nazis are evil. It wriggles itself out of the war crime issues, even when Hugo Stiglitz killed SS officers without their uniforms on. Chigraph uses a cattle killer for pacifying pigs to kill humans. In the cleanliness of it all, perhaps this is one of the best examples of moral violence. So let's break it down. Minus 10% for car owner, minus 20% for benefit, plus 40% non-hostile, killed with a pacifier, dying to a weapon honor not granted, plus 20%, plus 10% old age. It's 70% moral violence. Patrick Bateman killing a homeless would be more. This can get more complicated if I were to include a deduction just for Anton being the villain of the story. If a starved child brutally massacres 10 heavy soldiers, then that's power. In this case, there's no hint of morals. When 2 starved children kill each other, then it's morally equal, so not this type. If it were an ambush without an objective, it wouldn't count either. Cowardice doesn't get used by the system. Crossing a certain line, humans can definitely become beasts. In those cases, it doesn't count either because it'd be accidental kills and like nature. Of course, you can only apply this on media and make the call about the character's situation. Because what makes the moral type in the end is the victim. The killer only becomes a calculation after that. It can come down to the trolley problem, but oddly enough, stuff like this doesn't seem to appear often in fiction. Either that or I have missed it. Moral is all about the killer and victim and how they are killed or injured. Honorable mention for this type, The World is Mine, a flawed edgy manga critiquing strict Japanese pacifism. It also makes a conflict between hunters and city dwellers, ultimately trying to reach for peak human qualities. Anti-examples. This might be the toughest type to understand. Shin Godzilla killing thousands, it's an example because Shin Godzilla is more so intended to be an ecosystem and suffering. The civilians he kills is the same as if a tornado would kill residents, therefore Shin Godzilla's morals are equaled out at zero. A pure type of power would be a hero, morally good, literally Spider-Man. Open world games' major selling points is the freedom to do anything in a foreign world, but often violence in those worlds is restricted, hence sandbox games are their own genre. A bad way for games to tackle the immoral actions a player might commit is to just like called do a black screen. The Modern Warfare Baby Killer Easter egg followed once original Killable Children that the age-rating committee shut down, along with perceived dark ages of war and history. You might start thinking that violent fiction is on a decline, when AAA game manufacturers don't want to risk anything. This is false. Recently AAA has been thrown under the tide by simple indie games, and while some aren't explicitly violent, with game engines becoming more accessible, more people can make games, so there's a wide variety of artistic expressions. Also, what I really saw in making this graph is the violent media makes people violent, or violent media shows that it's peaceful times debate. It's very multidimensional and interesting, but not for me. There's violent rules in all the popular games, but no reputable publisher would make a mass shooter game. Hatred is probably the most famous example here.
My name is not important.
Spiritual successor of the original Postal, go on a rampage only topped by overloading the nuclear power plant with code 666. It's a really good game if you play it right. Destruction physics, and I love particularly being able to enter every house. A single A game that deserves more credit. But let's go one step down in quality to Morimi, a school shooting. At least it got game mechanics and an artistic vision here. The creator drew school shooting art earlier, and there's even supplementary gifs. Another step down to Mass Murderer Simulator, a fleshed out albeit clunky game with some dark humor, bonus points for real world kill counts. And lastly the ungeselig school shooting fan game, which relies on its shock factor and simplicity, also satisfying a throwaway joke from the show. Honorable mention, the Columbine Shooters do mod. 1970. Astro Boy and Mecha Mazinger Z are good Japanese manga heroes. Go Nagaisa vs. the move Devilman and Getter Robo, showing outcasts be really violent in their methods. 1990. Deadpool vs. comic book heroes and American Morph a parody with Fourth Wall. Here's Super Cancer. 23. Invincible comes out but makes superheroes violent and evil. 26. The Boys comes out as a poorly written hit piece. Invincible takes over the comics world just like Devilman once did. 2010. ReZero is one of the earlier isekai and already subversive generic isekai with violence and death and an underpowered protagonist.
Subaru! Subaru!
2015. Grand Theft Auto 5 makes video games meaningful. Call of Duty gets a parody. 2020. Invincible and The Boys get cartoon and TV show adaptations. When did Devilman Crybaby come out? It was Devilman's second adaptation. More props to Go Nagai. Here's Violence Jack, true moral violence.
I hate little kids. Filthy little brat.
I'll tell you right now where the money lies. Subversion and unusual cross-media adaptation game. But of course, you need to be great at your job to come up with premises this good. Anatomical alone seems rarely found in Western movies, and let's through the next coming out type. I would also put body horror more in the next type, besides maybe Scorn, so let's move to Asia. With Berserk's amazing art and darkness, of course it didn't miss to depict anatomy. Gantz always a nice monster battling movie. Battle Royale High School, beautiful anatomy animation. There's a low res dub version on YouTube, it's fun. It must have inspired Jujutsu Kaisen, there are so many similarities, they only differ in execution. A demon merges with a high school wrestler when aliens invade Earth, or something like that. Marvel. Insert possible joke about cleavage. It's just like Sukuna and Yuji. Sayonara Jetsubo Sensei is a mature comedy. I like how it uncovers and explains social phenomena in modern society. It's got fancy references to literature I never read yet. The anatomy in this opening is referencing a Dutch book written by Johann Adam Kulmus in 1722 that got a Japanese translation in 1774 and then traveled around to China having had superior medical information. Kinda hard to find done well in movies, combining moral and anatomical types but overmuch. Degrading humans is about the only thing Terrify is really good at. Terrify review, vibes and characters, way worse horrible pacing. Great craftsman influence but waste of resources and many other aspects. Not worth it. Makes me wonder, where's the line between trash or being a puppet dumbscream for easy success? I don't appreciate bad deconstructions or movies made as a joke. I believe you can make goofy or be scary like cartoons, but maybe these movies do have a place, regardless if they're bad, intentional or worse. Grotesque violence is the most obscure type. If it's not indie and or porn productions, it results in awesome media like Dead Space or Psychopaths. Seven is one of the greatest crime thrillers of all time. Condemned Criminal Origins is an amazing game, painting a dark atmosphere masterfully. Grimdark evil crime-ridden cities become some cold evil birds. Seriously though, this game was ahead of its time, not only combat detail and design, but also as a video game itself. It's got gruesome puppet killings, it might as well be a 7 adaptation. Psycho Pass is an anime original which manages to make symphony not only between its characters, story and themes, but also combines this figurative side with literal animation, music and direction. Cutting up the next sequence, I seriously noticed how in tune even the less important conversations are. There's always two things animated in a scene. The background art is a beautiful X to its cyberpunk city. The characters also complement each other with more experienced but technically lower ranked latent criminals the police uses to fight crime, and the actual main cast detectives, Akane and Gizuna, which are both in different ways immature. The main villain embodies the opposite of the themes you see with authority in this show, often citing old famous literature and wanting to destabilize society for his idea of freedom. Sci-fi doesn't get down dirty with the constant reminder of holograms AI. The Sybil system, which reliably ranks people's mental health, is very important in the parts of society Akane gets closer to by joining the police force. There's a constant small symphony with the literal and figurative written parts, but sometimes at a big event everything built up comes together and you notice you are seeing, hearing, thinking and feeling a beautiful symphony of all the show has to offer. A story about twisted justice being enforced through a myth of progression and justified with the pretense of a logical technology that can't make mistakes.
But we're all more machine than we realize.
Most people don't realize they are already a cyborg.
You're already quite the cyborg.
Your phone is already an extension of you.
For you, all these terminals and AI programs are practically a second brain. Am I right?
Like, how much smarter are you with a phone or computer than without? You can answer any question if you connect to the internet, any calculation. Your phone can remember videos, pictures, and everything perfectly.
When you hand over so much of your life and work to digital devices, the insistence you're not a cyborg doesn't sound very convincing anymore, now does it?
2012 by the way, 5 years after the iPhone and 10 years before the AI boom. Really, the cyborg clip isn't that crazy compared to the AI stuff and dystopia this show predicts. But hey, if you go off predicting the future of technology before it happens, the late Terence McKenna seemed to have done a better job. Also Ted Kaczynski. So basically, it's better than I remember. There's plenty of gore in it, but I want to focus on episode 6 to 8. On an ancient school, a murderer uses an off-market chemical to plastify girls from one of the last old girls' private schools and turn them into so-called creations of art. In revenge of her artist father losing everything after he made his purpose to inspire people with his paintings message that everyone is basically evil and needs to be aware of that to be good, turned into a vegetable by the advanced mental health facilities, removing all his stress. The most grotesque is not in comics, movies or books. Those mediums are too clean for Guru. It isn't fun for psychos. Guru is the Japanese tag, or slang for grotesque. Sometimes it breaks out, such as in famous shock gif, unfortunate girl getting pushed into the public by fortune, or VTuber Hachima uploading coexist law which has an imagery just above the usual dark Vocaloid song video's implications. There definitely is an allure to grotesque violence. Besides being intended or entering the mainstream as shock factor, being cheap gratification for psychos, good artists can express their morbid desires, instead of doing it in real life, God forbid, and create beautiful art. Like Junji Ito, who was a dentist before becoming mangaka by the way. So let me draw attention to how sociopathy is favored in jobs like police, therapists, and doctor due to their ability to turn off their feelings. Talent for morbidity. That's it. It didn't take a lot of work making this, but it was really hard. I only want this to be widely known, popular even.
I heard a different guy say this by the way, but I'm just going to say it again. I didn't mention it before, I think, because of some noble justice of not mentioning someone's great idea like this. Has just the amount of fun there.
I thank Production IG, Gen Onobochi, Nayoshi Shiotani, and the other guys, artists and staff for making Psycho Pass. This is actually a go. Bro, why did you... No. Huh? 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 No. Two. Grim violence archetype. Tyke? I promise. There we go. That last one was best. Take the first take for this one. Problem? It's really just aimed like a tongue twister. Oh, right here. Characters, story, and themes. Grammar. One of those is gonna have to do. Yeah. No, I'm gonna do the whole thing again. Encouraged. Man. Shh. Talent for morbidity. Talent for morbidity. Talent for morbidity.